With all the numeric types that we've been seeing, where we contain those values, we could also utilize arithmetic operations on them, such as, let's say, plus, minus, multiplication, division, and something really important that sometimes is frowned upon or forgotten, which shouldn't be, is the modulus. We'll talk about that in a second. So a couple things you need to know. These are the operators that is possible to do inside Java directly. Sometimes you'll see exponential and so forth, so on, but to do those, you'll need to make some extra calls. But by default, these are accessible. Now, these are called the operators. Well, obviously, the two variables beside one, so let's say 8 plus 2, or if there was a variable x plus y, these would be called the operands. Again, terminology is important. Operands. Maybe this terminology is not the most important thing, but it's always useful to be able to express yourself better. Now, we got to be careful with a bit of these things. So 8 plus 2 is pretty straightforward, equals 10, right? And actually, before we go forward, let's just do that with the code. So like this, it'll be nice and clean. So let's say integer, or actually without integers, we're just going to do a, well, obviously we're going to do our main first. We're going to do a print to the screen, and we're going to just say 8 plus 2. And here, if you have more spaces, it doesn't really matter. Just make it something clean. I like to have a little space after and before my operators. So 8 plus 2 is pretty easy. Let's do that again with 8 minus 2. Let's change the number a bit. Let's make it a bit more fun. And let's do 7 multiply 2. And let's do 7 divide 2. And one more, 7 modulus 2. Now, if you're smart enough and you know all this, pause the video, figure out what the values of each of these are, and then continue the video because we're about to press run. And most of these, you probably guessed it right. So 7 plus 2, 9. 7 minus 2, 5. 7 times 2, 14. Now, this is where it gets interesting, where we get to this division. So 7 divided by 2, normally you would get 3.5. Where's my pen? There we go. Normally you would get, I gotta put my pen on. Normally you would get 3.5, right? 3.5 times 2 would give you 7. 5 here is 0, adds 1 here. 3 plus 3, 6, and the 7 at the top, 7, right? But in this case, it gave you a 3, right? And that's problematic. We're going to come and talk about this in a second. We just want to go to the last one here. And the last one is our modulus. Actually, maybe we'll come back to modulus. I want to do a bunch of examples of that with you to make sure that you know what we're talking about. Now, the problem that we got here, why is this 3 and not 3.7? It's because both sides of the operator, both of the operands are integers. This is an int. This is an int. You got to understand that every value that you showcase has to take some sort of memory space. And this memory space is going to be allocated by the compiler directly. So it will understand that it sees a number and it's a whole number, so it needs a integer, right? It might select a short or something, but it's picking a whole number rather than picking our two floating numbers, which is float or double. Okay. Now, if this was int, if this is short int or something else, well, this will depend on your compiler and language. I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe in Java, by default, it's integer. Okay? Now, if we wanted this to be something else, let me go on my mouse. If we wanted this to be something else, there's always this letter that we could put at the end of our values to tell the compiler what we're utilizing, such as the capital L for long, such as the lowercase f for float, right? So if I put this float, well, then the compiler will know that this is a float and not a integer, right? So you could see here, now it's getting 3.5, and we'll come back to this in a second. So these letters, I don't know them by heart. If you put lowercase d, this is not a double, but this is a digit or a decimal. What was the, I forgot the exact thing, but this is again an integer. Oh no, it's a double in Java. My bad on that. So D is for doubles, F is for float. Normally the first letter, I think, no, in Java it's a bit different. I forgot what the value is. S, no. Anyway, you could look those up. There's a few of them that you could utilize. It would differ from language. Now, let's get back to this. This doesn't work because right now both sides are integer and it gives me back a wrong value. But the moment I put that if, we specify that one side is a float and one side is an integer, right? So we specified that one side is a float and that one side is an integer. Now the problem with these two operands is that it cannot do an operation on them unless both sides of the operator are the same type. And remember that we can't go downwards. We can't make something bigger into something smaller. So what we have to do is convert both sides. It will do it implicitly. It will convert this int into a float so that it could do this operation. So if a float is dividing a float, your end result is going to be a float. So this is important. Now, if you didn't have that if, or you didn't know about it, well, then you'll need to explicitly cast one side to a float or to something that could contain that, either a double maybe or a float, doesn't really matter, but you have to cast one side. So if we run it now, it should give us 3.5. And if we put that double in front of the 2, because one side is a double, it should still give us 3.5. Now, some issues that you normally will get is that you would put the double here, but you would put 7 divided by 2 inside a parentheses. Well, this casting will happen after the parentheses, and we're going to talk about parentheses. Well, actually, we don't need to talk about it. It's like real math. Parentheses will take precedence over everything else. Inside the precedence order, parentheses is always the highest, and it will always be like that. So in this case, even though you're casting it to a double, the problem is the operation is being done before that cast. So we get a 3 here, which is again a mistake. Notice we get the 0.0 because we cast it to a double, and it's showing you some precision. Right? So you got to be careful with these casting, and you got to make sure that if you want a correct casting, this happens really on division, make sure that one side is a float or a double. In this case, a float is better because it's smaller. We don't need that big of a number. Cool? So I'm going to leave this mistake here. Actually, we're going to copy that a couple times. I'm going to leave you the normal mistake. The way to fix it by doing, let's say, an F on one side. The other mistake, right? Mistake casted after. Anyway, you could come back in the video anytime. And the final solution was, which was to cast one side. So let's do the other side, 7 to, let's say, a double, just to show you a different thing than a float. Or actually, we just see, well, it's fine. Anyway, moving on. So that's for that. before we come, let's talk about modulus. Now, modulus is really interesting because it's really powerful. It has a lot of uses, but people are afraid because they don't understand modulus really well. If you don't, I suggest you go and learn, because modulus could be really useful in programming. It could allow you to, let's say, randomize some orders, or select one by one, or put them inside buckets, or etc. It has a lot of power. And I'm telling you, if you want to reach a decent level of programming skills, you need to understand modulus and utilize it. To be honest, I utilize modulus more than I utilize any of these things over here. Okay, so it's really important. Modulus basically says this is the remainder after I took as many 2's as I can from there. So let's say inside of a 7 modulus 2, we're going to decrease by 2 and see what's left. So 7, decrease it by 2, we got 5. Decrease it by 2, we got 3. Decrease it by 2, we got 1. Can I decrease it by 2? No, I would go negative. I don't have any more left. So my remainder becomes 1. Right? It's the leftover after your division. Remember, when we divided, we could only get 3 of them. Look, we got 1, 2, and 3. After that 3, whatever's left over, that would be the value or the score. So let's try a couple other numbers. Let's say 10 modulus 2. 10 modulus 2 would give you, well, let's take out 2, 8, 6, 4, 2, and 0. We have nothing left because we could take out 2's constantly until we reach 0. What if 10 modulus 3, right? You should notice it's 1. We take out 3, we got 7. We take out 3, we got 4. We take out 3, we got 1. Let's make it a bit more interesting. What if I do 3 modulus 10? How many 10's can we take out from 3? We can't take out anything, so we got a leftover of 3. Our remainder is 3. Cool? So play around with modulus. If you don't know, go online, get some. If you want, contact me, and we'll try to do more of that. Now, you got to understand that the precedence order, we were talking about that with the parentheses, is still present. So the precedence order, or normally you would learn something like a pyramid, which basically says which type of operator goes first. It's always going to be present inside programming as well. And at the bottom of this, we're going to have our plus, minus. At the next level, we're going to have our multiplication, division, and modulus. Mind you, if they're at the same level, which one comes first? It's the rule of left to right. We're going to do an example soon. Okay? So, and even more interesting than this, obviously there's exponents and all this, but that's not possible as an operator. Some languages might allow you to do exponent by doing star, star. I don't believe that's available inside Java. We could try it out quickly right now, just to make sure that I'm not rambling on. No. So you see, that's exponents are not available to you as a default operation or operator. So on top of this pyramid, it's not exponents that's there, but something really important. And I'm going to bring this back again for a future video. So just remember this. The top of the list is always going to be parentheses. And this is important. Why? Is because I say don't memorize what comes first. Just utilize the parentheses to enforce what you want to be ran first. Let's talk about that. So over here, we're going to do another system.out.println, and we're going to do some weird stuff. So let's say 10 multiplied 3 plus 4 divide by 2. Now, if you respected the rules of this pyramid, the first thing that should be running is, again, from left to right. We see that the highest levels are our star, our multiplication, and our division. And lastly, it's our plus. So one of these have to run first. We obey the rule of left to right. So we do 10 multiply 3, we get 30. Then we ignore the plus because we got another one, division. So we do 4 divided by 2, which gives us 2. And then we do the final thing, 30 plus 2, which gives us 32. Right? Sorry for my handwriting. So let's run it just to make sure I'm not blabbing randomness. So 32. So that's good. So rather than letting it for luck, well, this is pretty straightforward, but rather than letting it for luck, what I like to do, it's always to utilize the parentheses so that I could confirm what I want to run first. So here, I confirm that 3 plus 4, I want it to run first, which will give me 7. Then it would be 7 times 10, 70. 70 divided by 2. And that would give me 35. Right? So what's cool is I could put parentheses inside parentheses and specify even further. Maybe I want, I don't know, let's say after I did the 3 plus 4, I want, rather than the multiplication to happen, I want the division to happen first. Is it going to make a big change or not? That doesn't really matter. What matters is I'm enforcing what I want to do be done first, what I want to be done second, and lastly, the one that's not in the parentheses is going to be done last. So the rule of thumb is always do the inner parentheses first and then keep going out. Okay? So this is arithmetic operation, and the nested parentheses, you're going to be your lifesavers. See you in the next video.